Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Australian Society of Exploration Geophysicists. Before we start the webinar, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and the many lands on which we undertake our work. I recognize their continuing education, continuing connection to these lands, water, and culture, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. My name is Dr. Yvette Pujomjomani, so I will be hosting the webinar today. Before that, I would like to go through some housekeeping. The ASEG would like to thank our corporate members. We have for corporate plus high size, total seismic, well size. We can't do much without them. We really appreciate your help. We also thank our corporate members, Southern Geoscience, AGS, Transparent Earth Geophysics, CENTOS, DUG, and GDD. We also have some branch sponsors. In Western Australia, you can see we have a fair bit of sponsors there. I won't go naming them, you can see. And we also have some sponsors in South Australia, Northern Territory. A reminder that the other states don't have sponsors. So if you would like to be a sponsor, please get in touch with us. A little bit of housekeeping. Everyone is on mute except myself now. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So you let the speaker finish the talk, and then after that we'll have some questions and answers. If you would like to ask a question, there are two ways you can put your question in the Q&A tag, or you can type your question in the chat, and I will be monitoring that. Some member benefits. If you are not already a member of ASEG, we have a few benefits. I'm not going to read them all. Just a few. You will have free access to exploration geophysics. You have reduced entry to AGC conferences. You have access to job advertisements that are posted on the ASEG website. And you have access to our famous annual wine offer. It's coming up soon. Great presents for Christmas or end of the year. And important to note is also that there's free membership for students and half price for retirees and recent graduates. Please keep in touch. We have many ways you can keep in touch by email, on our website, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. There are several ways you can keep in touch with us. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and ask our speaker today to share her screen. And while she's doing that, I will just say a little bit about her. So Dr. Maria Constanza Manassero, who is commonly known by Coti. It's probably easier for you all to remember as Coti. She has a master's degree in geophysics at the University of La Plata in Argentina. And she graduated with PhD in geophysics at Macquarie University in Sydney in December 2019. Her research project consisted of the development of new methodologies to help study the lithospheric structure and mapping the location of mineral deposit and energy sources within Australia. In particular, she had developed a new methodology for probabilistic inversion of 3D magnetotelluric data as part of an ARC funding research program. Coti is currently working as a postdoctoral research fellow at Macquarie University on the same projects as part of an ARC linkage grant called Illuminating AusLAMP. And this is in collaboration with the University of New South Wales, Geoscience Australia, and several Australian Geological Survey organizations. The topic of today's talk is including 3D magnetotelluric data into joint probabilistic inversion for imaging the deep Earth. I would like to hand over to Koti now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for a nice introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm Koti. And first, I would like to thank the ASEG organizers for the opportunity to present this seminar and show our work, which is part of Illuminator AusLAMP project and Exploring for the Future program in Australia. So, so today I'm going to talk about how do we include 3D magnetotelluric data into joint probabilistic inversions. And mainly I'm going to present the preliminary results of the first joint probabilistic inversion of 3D magnetotelluric and seismic data in Southeast Australia. So I would like to give you an overview of the purpose of this talk and start by saying that probabilistic inversion of 3D magnetotelluric data were never an option due to the computational cost of the forward solutions. So the purpose of this talk is then to define all these concepts that you may not be familiar with, introduce this problem and our approach to solve fast forwards, and then show you how do we use this to include 3D magnetotelluric data into joint probabilistic inversions. So after the introduction of the forward, inverse problem and probabilistic inversions, I'm going to talk about the basic of our approach. Then I will present the structure of the code, the parameterization and sampling strategy, and I will present the result of a syntactic example. And then I will focus mainly on the preliminary results. So what is magnetotellurics? So magnetotellurics, or MT, is a passive technique that measures variations of the Earth's electric and magnetic field to determine the electrical conductivity distribution below the surface. So since the electrical conductivity of rocks depends on the composition, temperature, water content, and melt content, MT is very interesting because it gives us direct information about the thermal structure and the presence of fluids and melts, which are associated with the localization of ore deposits. So what do we mean now with inverse and forward problem? So the forward problem in MT means that given a conductivity model, we need to compute the electric and magnetic field at the surface of the Earth. And this is a mapping from the parameter or model space to the data space. Now, the forward problem in MT is far to compute in 1D and 2D, but is computationally very expensive in 3D. So if we want to obtain a conductivity model, given the observed electric and magnetic field at the surface of the Earth, what we need to do is solve an inverse problem, and this is a mapping from the data space to the model space. But in real scenarios, we have data with uncertainties related to measurement errors, for example, and this means that we don't have an exact data point, but a region where the data lives. And this also means that we will have a lot of models with their uncertainties that can be mapped from that region in the data space. And this is what we call the non-uniqueness of the inverse problem. So together with the non-uniqueness, we also need to have in mind that besides MT, we usually have other datasets like geoid, gravity anomalies, magnetics, gravity gradients, and seismic data. And all of these datasets are sensitive to different physical parameters, and therefore they can help constrain the models that explain the observed data. And in this way, they can reduce ambiguity of the inversion and increase model resolution too, of course. So in particular, the joint inversion of MT and seismic data is very interesting because they offer complementary sensitivities to the temperature, composition, and fluid or melt content that is impossible to obtain with other datasets. For example, in the lithosphere, both seismic data and MT data can put constraints to the background thermal and mineralogical structure, but only MT will be strongly sensitive to hydrogen content or minor conductive phases. The same with like water content and melt too. So this makes the joint inversion of MT and seismic data very powerful, and this is also why there is a lot of interest in obtaining these data sets together over large regions. And this is the case of the AusLAMP program in Australia. So the main question that arises is then, how do we integrate all of these and obtain models that can explain the different data sets, and mainly the different data sets with their uncertainties? Yeah. So on the one hand, we can integrate different data sets via deterministic or traditional inversions, which are based on the minimization of an error term between the forward response and the data. And they have been successfully applied for inverting millions of unknowns, but the solution often depends on the choice of the regularizations and the initial models. And these choices may also limit the information about the model parameter uncertainty, and may also introduce a bias, meaning that some of them, some of the features of the true models may not be resolved because we cannot explore the whole range of models that could explain the data. Deterministic methods also seek for a unique or best solution, and they are not well prepared to deal with the non-uniqueness of geophysical MT inversion in particular. So yeah, and also the solution is normally based on a single physical parameter. But on the other hand, probabilistic inversion methods are less affected by these limitations, and they provide way more information about the parameters of interest. So probabilistic or Bayesian inversions do this by exploring the model or parameter space, computing the forward problem and forward solution for each of these models, and assessing how likely are these models in explaining the data with the uncertainties. So we do this for every model that we have, and as a result, we obtain a probability density function, or PDF, over data and parameters. So this PDF is a function of how likely are the models in explaining the different data sets. And they're normally obtained via Markov chain Monte Carlo or MCMC methods. So I will explain you a bit these concepts in the next slides. So this posterior PDF then includes all the information about the unknown parameters and the uncertainties conditioned on the data and the modeling assumptions that we made. And that's why it represents the most general solution to the inverse problem. So in particular, this PDF is over the parameters is given by the Bayes rule, which is this one. That can be seen as a conjunction of the available information on the parameters M, given in the prior function or prior information, that is this P, and the information about the uncertainties and modeling assumptions, which is condensed in this function L, which is called the likelihood. So the prior information represent what we know about the unknown parameters prior to the inversion. And this could be, for example, structural, geological, petrological information in the region of interest. Now, the conditional function L, the likelihood, describes the probability of obtaining the observed data, D, given a model M, and is normally defined by the distribution of the data uncertainties. So it's commonly also assumed that if the errors follow a Gaussian distribution, the likelihood will follow an exponential function, where this term S is called misfit, and it's a well-known misfit term. So in general, this posterior distribution, the posterior PDF, will be nonlinear and highly dimensional. So it doesn't have any analytical description. In this case, then we need to approximate this posterior distribution by sampling it pointwise, for example, using Markov chain Monte Carlo. What they do is proposing or sampling models in the model space and evaluating the probability, the posterior probability in a sense. So one of the most common is Metropolitan-Hastings algorithm, and I will show how it works now. So let's say that we are in a current sample that is MT-1, and from there we're going to propose a new sample from the model space, and this is a new conductivity model. And for doing this, we use a proposal distribution, which is a function that helps us move ourselves in the space. So then we're going to evaluate its prior probability and the likelihood of this new sample in explaining the data by computing the forward solution. So we summarize these probabilities in this following ratio, metropolis ratio R. And if this ratio is higher than 1, then this move MT is accepted, but otherwise we accept it with probability between 0 and 1. So let's suppose that in this case we reject this sample, then we stay in MT minus 1, and from there we're going to propose another sample and we evaluate the ratio again. So if we accept it, we then move to MT minus 1 and we repeat the process from that sample. As we repeat this process, we explore the whole parameter space. And as you can see, this sampling Bayesian approach, this sampling based approach, of the probabilistic inversion makes them less efficient than deterministic inversions because they require to compute the forward solution and millions of samples. And this becomes very impractical when the forward problems are computationally expensive. So in this way, probabilistic inversions provide extensive information about the unknown parameters. The results are almost independent of the initial values. But in order to perform the probabilistic inversions, we need to run millions of forward solutions, and this limits the application to problems where only fast forwards are available. So since 3D MT forwards are really expensive to compute, they had never been used in a probabilistic inversion before. So now, how do we compute fast forward then and include 3D MT into joint probabilistic inversions? So for this, we use a very simple idea, which is computing meaningful forward solutions and combining them using reduced basis methods. An easy way to understand this is to imagine that we want to generate a color, any color. So one way will be to use the RGB color palette where red, green, and blue are primary or basis colors. So by combining different quantities of them, we can generate any color that we want. Now, reduced basis works in the same way. In this case, we will have some bases that are full forward solutions or certain conductivity models. And for any other conductivity model that we sample, we will find an approximate solution or surrogate solution as a combination of those bases. So let's imagine that we are performing the MC-MC inversion and we have a starting 3D conductivity model. We will first compute the full forward expensive solution and store this as a base, as a first base. Then doing the probabilistic inversion, we sample a new conductivity model. And for each of them, we're going to evaluate how similar is the solution of this model to the solutions or the bases that I have stored. So if it's similar to a tolerance, we will compute the approximate solution as a combination of the stored bases. And if it's, in this case, for example, if we have another model that is very different to the previous one, we will then compute a new base, this green base, and store it as a new base. Again, when we evaluate for another model, if it's similar enough, we will now use both bases that we have stored. So this means that when we are performing the joint probabilistic inversion and we need to compute the forward for each data set, instead of computing the expensive full forward for MT, we seek the solution as a combination of these bases, and this is super fast. Of course, this works for both the joint probabilistic inversion or the inversion of MT data only, and the details of this methodology are presented in our first paper of 2020. So how do we implement the reduced basis approach for the joint MT and seismic inversion? So this is a scheme of the structure and different levels of parallelizations using our code, which is written in Fortran. And in gray, we have we show the CPU parallelization that we have, and in oranges, all the subroutines used to make it computationally efficient. So the computation of the MT forward is parallelized by frequency and mode, and we also have a level of parallelization at the solver's level. So I've been working on this structure for the last years to make it computationally efficient, which combined with the reduced basis is what makes it possible to reduce the computational time from minutes to approximately a second, around a second per simulation. So how to parameterize our models for the joint inversion? So now, a key difficulty in the joint inversion of two or more geophysical datasets is how to consistently define the relationship between the model parameters. So in the case of joint inversion of seismic and MT data, the primary parameters controlling both the seismic velocity and the electrical conductivity in the mantle are the temperature, ball composition, and pressure. But also the electrical conductivity is highly sensitive to hydrogen content and localized melt or fluid pathways. So then the model parameterization that we choose should allow us to accommodate for these variations in the primary or background parameters and those variations responsible for the conductivity anomalies above the background. So with all these things in mind, we imagine that we have the following large scale model with a background conductivity structure and localized conductivity anomalies. So we propose a mix or combined parameterization where we have we use the LAB depth and thermal nodes and layers in the crust to represent the background of first order conductivity distribution related to temperature, pressure, and composition. And this parameterization will also provide us the background seismic velocity field related to the long wavelength thermophysical state of the lithosphere. And then we will have another parameterization, second parameterization used to represent the anomalous conductivity over the background, where the parameters are conductivity nodes, these white nodes partially located within the volume. So then the anomalous conductivity field is obtained as an interpolation of these node values, and the total field is then an addition of the anomalous structure and the background structure. So without getting into details, I want to mention that the sampling strategy is tailored to take advantage of the differential sensitivities of the seismic and the MT data sets to the conductivity and velocity structures in the lithosphere. So with this in mind, we subdivide our sampling, like our MCMC inversion, in sampling stages. And the first stage aims to constrain the background conductivity and the velocity associated to the first order temperature, which is defined by the LAB depth mainly. And in the second stage, we start sample the conductivity anomalies over the background. So during these both stages, we independently sample like LABs, temperature nodes, or the conductivity nodes. And the advantage of using this is that we obtain a rapid convergence at the beginning of the inversion, because the LAB depth help to constrain the first order conductivity pretty well. So once we have enough information about both the primary parameter, like the background parameters and the nodes, we then incorporate adaptive strategies to efficiently sample the full posterior PDF. So in order to assess the applicability of our methods to realistic scenarios, in our second publication, we presented the joint probabilistic inversion of 3D and surface waves synthetic data. And for this, we have created a synthetic model using the crustal conductivity found in Southeast Australia, using data from the AusLAMP array. And the area of interest is shown here in the first panel, where we see that we have a background conductivity determined by the background parameters and several multi-scale conductivity anomalies that simulate realistic geological features. In particular, we have included these elongated anomalies that resemble translithospheric and transcrustal magmatic system. So the model parameters are, in this case, 361 LAB depth and almost 23,000 conductivity nodes. So the MT synthetic data were computed at 298 AusLAMP stations. The data were the full impedance tensor computed for 18 periods between 16 seconds and 40 seconds, which corresponds with the frequencies found in the AusLAMP data. For the case of the surface waves, the synthetic data are the normal Rayleigh wave phase velocities. between 15 seconds and 880 seconds, with an interstation distance of 50 kilometers, which is comparable to those of the Wombat array. So in this case, for this inversion, the initial model used a flat LAB, like no structure at all. And as a result, we obtain the full posterior probability density functions, as we said before, over the parameters of interest. So with this information, we could be interested, for example, in obtaining the maximum likelihood estimation, the mean model, and the models corresponding with the lower and upper bound of the 98% confidence interval. So this is the range of values that we are 95% confident that contains the population mean. So for me, one of the nicest ways to explore the posterior PDF and show the variability of the models that are likely to explain the data is to take random samples of the posterior PDF. So here we have slices from the true maximum likelihood estimator mean, again, the 5 and 95 percentile, models corresponding to the 5 and 95 percentile, and 5 random samples, which are taken as the mean of 10 randomly chosen models from all the conductivities models making up the posterior PDF. So here, as expected, the features that are well resolved by the inversion are persisting in all the subsets, but the features that are poorly resolved show higher variability among the subsets. We also include the results from a MODM deterministic inversion in the last column. So here we have the same results, but at depth, and we observe here that the crustal and the background conductivity structure and the location and volume of the anomalies are very well resolved. So the identifiability of the background structure is also illustrated here with the marginal posterior PDF. So these are the posterior for the LAB depth. And we see that the mean of the distributions are very close to the real value, which is shown in green. So we also have some of the posterior PDF for the conductivity nodes, where it can be seen that some of them are bimodal distributions, and this is a lot of information, about the probability of those nodes in explaining the data. So I also plotted the number of bases computed for all frequencies. And it can be observed that after 600,000 simulations, all the number of bases for each frequency reaches a plateau or saturation level. And this means that with the current number of bases, we can approximate, well, any forward solution that we want, as no new solutions are needed. Here we also have the misfit, where we see, well, the misfit for MT and the surface webs. Here are examples of the posterior PDF for the data, for the surface webs, where we see the data and data errors in green and the initial model in blue. We can see that the dispersion data points are contained within 1 standard deviation from the posterior, sorry. So we also have posterior PDF for the empty data, where again the synthetic data and error bars are plotted in green, and this in the panels the data are scaled by the square root of the period. So the results from this example, this synthetic example, demonstrated that the joint inversion of seismic and empty data is a practical option with modest computational resources, and succeeded in identifying the LAB and the conductivity structures, but mainly that it produced well-behaved posterior distributions and measurements of the uncertainty of the model parameters. And again, all this is in our second publication. So lastly, as part of the Exploring for the Future program, I would like to present the results of the first joint probabilistic inversion of 3D MT using AusLAMP data in Southeast Australia and a seismic velocity model derived from teleseismic tomography. So for this, we used the data from 298 AusLAMP stations and a p-wave velocity model obtained from teleseismic and ambient noise tomography. The inversion parameters are 441 columns with their own LAB depth, 3 crustal layers, and 8 temperature nodes, and this is for defining the background. It is the background parameterization, and then we also have almost 8,000 conductivity nodes to define the to characterize the anomalous conductivity structure. Yeah, so the initial model corresponds with the LAB taken from Rawlinson 2017, and the Mojo and cluster density are taken from the AusArray model. So to place ourselves in the area, we have here maps showing the origins and the geological province in Southeast Australia. And we also show the Paleozoic to Cenozoic basins in the area, together with the basaltic volcanoes here in pink and purple, and the leucitide volcanoes here in orange, that correspond with the Cosgrove line. So some of the preliminary results are of the inversion, the joint probabilistic inversion, are the mean LAB depth and the lower and upper bound of the 68% confidence interval, which corresponds with the models that fall within 1 standard deviation from the mean. We have also included the LAB depth obtained using LINMOD, which is a joint probabilistic inversion framework, and the LAB depth derived from the velocity models from Davis and Rawlinson. What we see here is that a big correlation between our mean model and the model obtained using LINMOD, and with the first order structures found with Davis and Rawlinson. So mainly these figures show a highly heterogeneous lithosphere structure in South Australia with deeper LABs below the Cunnamunna province, which is consistent with this cratonic region. We also observe a high correlation between the location of the volcanic centers and the structure of the LAB, and mainly with the series of LAB steps. So if you see, we have intermediate LAB depth that correlate with leucitide volcanoes, and shallow LAB depth that correlate with the location of basaltic volcanoes. So we're going to come back to this later on. So as a comparison, we show here the LAB obtained after a probabilistic inversion using MT data only. And it's clear that MT data alone provides poor constraints to image the LAB. And therefore, other type of data sets like seismic data are necessary to properly image or properly constrain the LAB. So the following slide compare the results of our joint probabilistic inversion and those from the Modième deterministic inversion in the crust. Here we have the lower and upper bound of the 68% confidence interval and the mean models for different depths. And where we see that between 2 and 30 kilometers, the structure seen in our inversion and Modième correlates well. But in addition, of course, we have all this information about the models that fall within 1 standard deviation and fit the data equally well. And of course, this gives us information about the variability of the conductivity models that can explain the data. So using the 200 ohm meter contour of the conductivity model at 2 kilometer depth, we observe that the extent of the basins is well mapped by the mean of our models. And we also see a correlation of the conductivity models with the total magnetic anomalies and a shear velocity model in the area. For example, we have this high conductivity and low velocity structure in the crust, like in the shallow crust in the Cunnamunna province that correlate with this magnetic anomaly. And then we also see these concentric features, structures at 30 kilometer depth that have been imaged by potential field and passive seismic data. So the following slides compare the same results, but at depth from 50 to 100 kilometers. And what I want to point out here is the difference that we observe in the conductivity models below the LAB, which is around 70 to 80 kilometers in the south and southeast part of the model. So these differences are more evident between 120 to 250 kilometer depth, where we're certain when using MT data only, we obtain wave-resistive mantle below the LAB, which is unreal for those depths and temperatures. Now, when we're performing the joint inversion, we see a more conductive mantle like in that region. And this is mainly due to the favorable constraint imposed by the seismic data in the joint inversion. We also see that the mantle follows, like the conductivity structures here follow a northeast trend similar to the structures observed in MODIEM. So the correlation between the thermal and the conductivity structures is clearly seen below the eastern volcanics here at 140 kilometer depth, where the high conductivity region falls within the 1250 degree contour. At this depth, we also observe that the image mantle conductivity correlates well with the location of the recent volcanism and the pattern of the P wave velocity, for sure. Another example of this correlation is this high resistive stripe that correlates with very high velocities. So what we observe here is that this high conductivity region below the leucittite volcanoes does not correlate with a temperature anomaly here. So we interpret them as highly metasomatized regions. So in order to distinguish these regions, I'm working with Sinan Oseirin using his code MATE for making interpretation of the MT models of the mantle. And what we do is as an input, we have the composition, conductivity, and thermal models from our joint inversion, and the code searches for the water content as a proxy for metasomatism or mantle fertility. So with this, we have obtained the following maps of bulk water content for the conductivity models that we have. In this case, we show vertical slices for the conductivity, water content, temperature, and P wave velocity. In this case, it's a transect along from the Cunhamona province to the new volcanic provinces, crossing all the geological provinces on the west. And this shows a very interesting correlation between the geological boundaries seen in the surface and the location of wet metasomatized structures in the mantle. So these dipping structures alternate conductive wet and dry resistive lithosphere, which resemble the subduction accretion processes in Eastern Australia. We also observe a highly conductive region, hydrogen mantle below the Cunhamona province, which correlates with the fact that Eastern Australia was accreted from west to east by several origins, and this gave more time to the mantle below Cunhamona province to become metasomatized. So beneath the new volcanic province, on the other hand, we have this conductor at 150 kilometer depth that extends way below the LAB, and it correlates with high temperature anomaly there. So this scenario is favorable for to assume the presence of melt in this area. So the next transect goes from north to south, crossing the location of the leucittites in the north and the leucittite hills. And what's interesting here is that we have high probability that the leucittite volcanoes correlate with metasomatized regions in the mantle. And we also clearly see these LAB steps that we were mentioning before that correlate well with the location of the leucittite hills and the basaltic volcanoes. So the source of these leucittites have been commonly associated with the mantle plume. But however, Shea et al. From Macquarie University has been studying the source of these volcanoes, and given the composition and the derived melt temperatures from these samples, they propose that the source could be due to small convection cells in the series of LAB steps. So the striking thing is that we perfectly see those steps in the lithosphere, which could be areas prone to generating small-scale edge-driven convection cells. So this proposed model is shown in the following figure from Shea et al. And summarizes what could be happening along this black line. So due to the plate motion of the Australian plate, the arrows show that the asthenosphere will produce this sharing of metasomatized material in the lithosphere that will enter the edge-driven convection cell and act as a way to reduce the solutes. No? They will act as a fusible to produce local melting. So the results presented here, together with the petrology and nail chemistry by Shero, suggest that maybe localized edge-driven convection cells are likely to account for the volcanism along these edge progressive tracks in Southeast Australia rather than a hot mantle plume. So here are examples of the posterior PDF for the seismic and the MT data. And yeah, I would like to conclude emphasizing that the joint probabilistic inversion of 3D MT data with other data sets is possible thanks to our strategy that combines an efficient parallel pattern structure, reduced basis methods, and adaptive strategies. And this one makes it possible to reduce the computational time of the forward problem. And this, together with an efficient parameterization of the background and the conductivity anomalies, is what results in the first numerical platform to jointly invert 3D, MT, and seismic data, or other data sets too in the future in a probabilistic way. So thank you so much for attention. Here's a list of our papers, and we're currently working on our third paper presenting these results. So yeah, if you have any questions, I think we have some time, and if not, please don't hesitate in send me an email afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Koti, for such an interesting talk on, that joint inversion of MT data and seismic velocity. I'm just having a look at the chat here. I can't see any question unless I have missed it. Is there anyone who has a question and didn't have a chance to ask and would like to do it now? We have a few minutes for questions, please. Well, I have a question.
Sure.
It's very good to see how you are integrating, your MT and seismic velocity. Is there any plan to do the same thing using a different geophysical data set?
Sure. Yeah. So this was we have surface waves already. And the next step will be to include the full travel time tomography, which I'm working with people from Macquarie University to make this possible. And then, of course, on top of this, you can start adding as any geophysical data that you want, like gravity, gyre, the same way as LIMOD does. And if you're familiar with LIMOD, that will be the same. Another plan is to actually take this and insert it into the joint probabilistic inversion done by LIMOD in 3D. So we have that plan for sure. Yeah.
That's great to hear, but I guess you need a lot of computing time and computer power to be able to do that sort of inversion.
Yeah. And mainly, I mean, it's about taking care of how the parallelization is done, and what we've done here is actually make it possible to be able to perform probabilistic inversion for 3D MT data, which is the hardest problem in a sense. So having this, the rest is easier, in a sense.
Thank you for that, Maria.
Thank you.
Any question from the audience? Anyone has a question, a burning question that you would like to ask now? Well, I had another one. This is a quick one. Again, I think it was really good to see that in taking your parameters, it wasn't only using seismic velocity, that you were taking some data, for example, for the mantle composition, you took it from using mantle xenolith data. That's really good to see that sort of integration and it's coming up where now this is a very kind of new innovative technique. How long do you think it's going to take for the international community to adopt that sort of technique?
Well, I mean, in a sense, I think probabilistic inversions are becoming way popular due to this, all the information that we can get from the probabilistic inversion and the uncertainties mainly on the models. So, and again, also MT is becoming very popular too, as you know. So I think the research or the people is already ready for this. And the code is ready in itself too, of course, to an academical level. Of course, is not prepared for to be very friendly to the user at this stage, and that would require another more work on that, of course, not to make the code readable, available for everyone, and easy to do. But I think the interest is already there, and this, of course, could be applied to any type of data. We right now, our focus is the lithosphere. Like how do we parameterize the model? It is focused on the lithosphere, but that doesn't mean that we cannot change the parameterization to do something focused more on the crust, no? Mainly due to the interest on localization of ore deposits and stuff. So yeah, and of course this is work in progress as everything, but yeah, we're getting there for sure.
Thank you, very interesting. I think there's a question. I'll just check either a question or a comment. There is a question from Mark Duffett. I'll read it out. I think I saw Moho was taken from AusRAM. Was this allowed to vary in the inversion, or was it left as a priori constraint?
Yeah, so in this case, we take the Moho from AusRAM and leave it fixed during the inversion. But we do that is we also define crustal layers, and of course we vary the seismic velocity of those the layers in the crust on top of the conductivity structure that is a little bit different. But that Moho can be included as a parameter if we want on the inversion. The thing is, like here, we are not interested in the crust, so we want to have the best representation that we can of the crust with freedom. Of course, we need to represent this because that changes all the structure. But if we know things already, in this case, the Moho is the main thing actually that we fix it. The same with the composition, for example. The composition, it can be a parameter of the inversion, but in this case, of course, that increases the number of parameters and makes it, it takes longer for the inversion to converge. So in this case, we use a mean-mounted composition from anomalies in the area, and we found out that the inversions work really well, mainly because the sensitivity of the MT and seismic to the composition is of second order compared to the temperature. And since we constrain it pretty well with the anomalies from SHARE 2022, we did some tests and found that that's like pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you. There are two other questions. There's a question from Philip Wayne. What is the most surprising result you have seen with this work so far?
Well, first of all, we can include 3D MT data into probabilistic inversions. That wasn't possible until now because of the computational time of the forward. Second of all, because of this, we have information about the uncertainties, of course. And then again, when you constrain this MT data, I think one of the main things is like, well, MT data is great, but it doesn't have the power to, or it hasn't had sensitivity to distinguish what are the effects in controlling the conductivity. So then you need other type of data sets to constrain for example, what is temperature, what part of that conductivity thing that you're seeing is related to temperature, what is related to metasomatism in the mantle, which is related to water content. So once, if you have MT alone, is conductivity, but when you put other data sets, you actually see the great thing of the joint inversion, no? Like kind of dissociate things and make more complete interpretations of that, if that makes sense. And probably one of the results also that I think is very nice to see that our results in Southeast Australia matches so well with this model proposed by Shea et al. From completely different, like xenolith and volcanic samples, that they are saying, well, what we see is actually that the volcanic centers in South Australia, they were normally associated with the mantle plume, like the source of these the volcanoes, but we see something different that aligns with another research. No, so that's also, I think, is something really, really interesting to observe.
Thanks for that. Thank you. It looks like the chat has been disabled. I'm sorry about that. It must be some setting in the, but if you have any question, please, you can put it in the Q&A. There's another question from Mark Duffett. I don't know if it's a follow-up question from what he asked before. Would you be interested in getting interested in the cross with this approach? Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. There's always scope for that. And again, the method works for everything. So you just need to change the parameterization and don't think about the lithosphere as a whole, and then do the parameterization more focused on the crust. But it's essentially it's the same, no? So yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. That's great. Thank you. Any other question from anyone? All right, I'll take the silence as no. Well, I would like to thank you again, Maria, for such an interesting talk. Maria tells me she's joining us from Europe. It's the morning there for her, and thank you for taking the time. And yeah, it was very interesting talk. And thank you everyone for joining as well. Would like to thank you again. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yvette. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for presenting my book here. It's been great. Thank you. Okay, well, yeah, thank you. If you have any other questions, just please send me an email and I can follow up on that. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.